Welcome back to The Long Game, where we demystify science and unpack how Scottish ideas become medicines, devices, and companies.
Hey everybody, I'm Ross Cagan, Regis Professor of Precision Medicine at the University of Glasgow and Director of the McNabb Center for Cancer Innovation.
And I'm Sandy Weir. I've spent much of my career at the intersection of technology, investment, and health innovation, and it's a delight to see you all.
Hey Sandy. You may be shocked to know that this is a podcast about the collision of cells, code, and capital.
Yeah, welcome back, everyone. So this episode, we're continuing the discussion around the power of the human mind and the remarkable healing tool it can be when it's given a chance. Ross, I'm of course referring to the placebo effect.
Previously, we discussed the power of stimulating healing. This is a concept that has been known, if not really understood, for millennia. Aristotle wrote about the importance of friendships and so on in our health. This placebo effect is more than just positive thinking. The idea that if you believe a treatment or procedure will work, it's going to be successful. It's really much more specific than that, which I think is, for me, really interesting. It's about harnessing the power of the connection between your brain and your body. The brain, of course, controls the body, and you can help it along and really amplify how they work together. So, Sandy, just as a reminder, we want to be responsible here. Placebos won't lower your cholesterol. Eating more sausage rolls is the only way to lower your cholesterol, as we previously discussed. They won't shrink a tumor. What do you think, Sandy?
Yeah, that's right. We're just coming on the podcast today. We're talking about the power of Tunnocks wafers. Maybe that will be a future podcast. But yeah, right now, that's right, Ross. We're back onto the placebo effect. And today, I think we're going to think about not just how placebos can make you feel better. We've admitted, and of course, we've been upfront that they won't cure you. But when we think about how effective they are for conditions like pain management, for stress-related insomnia, for the sort of cancer treatment side effects that we understand from fatigue and nausea. But now in this episode, Ross, you're going to begin today by enlightening us further on some pretty surprising examples, right?
Yeah, so this is where we now transition from the part one, where we talked about placebos, really talked about the general ideas. One of my favorite experiments from part one is that you can block the effect with naloxone. So if you block opioid release, you block the placebo effect. So it really is a thing that your brain is doing to your body. So an example I want to give, Sandy, is Parkinson's disease. It's pretty specific in what it's doing, at least to a first degree. It involves a loss of dopamine-producing neurons in parts of the brain that help control movement, like the nigra striatum, and so on. So dopamine is central to the disease, is the point here. And so some studies, when people with Parkinson's believed they were receiving active treatment, but actually received placebo, their brains still actually released dopamine. That's the key point. And for a bit, they improved. That's amazing to me. It means that expectation was not just a pleasant feeling that made me feel better or encouraged me to, say something when I'd been quiet. It engaged a very specific chemical system involved in the disease.
Yeah, it's remarkable. And I guess in this case, the expectation became dopamine.
Yeah, exactly. Now, in a limited aspect, of course, but a very real sense. I mean, this all matters. Dopamine that's coming from release through your brain, of course, is dopamine, just like the pill is. So just to be precise, though, the placebo is not regrowing dopamine neurons. All right. So there's a lot of efforts with stem cells and so on to do that. It's not that. It does not stop Parkinson's disease. It does not replace proper treatment is the point. But what it can do for at least a moment in some patients is recruit remaining brain circuits and improve symptoms.
Yeah, that's a distinction I find really persuasive. We're not saying that positive thinking cures Parkinson's, but expectation has a biochemical footprint.
Yeah, and I think this is where we've all, as a society, really started to grow, which is this idea that psychological does not mean it's not real. The brain is an organ. It uses chemistry. Sometimes we invoke the liver to do things, the kidneys, we push them to do things, and so on. So now we're pushing the brain to do it, and we're using a medication that it understands. The brain is constantly talking to your body. So all of this makes sense.
Yeah, and the power's in your head, and it's not dismissal.
Yeah, exactly. This, of course, is the point. Your head is part of your body.
Yeah. We also need the counter example, of course, because this whole concept just becomes way too seductive without that.
Yeah, and that's right. So now comes some balance, not just a warning, but a balanced discussion of what placebos do, what they don't do, and why reliance on placebos can be a problem. So, for example, in one study, people with asthma received an active inhaler or a placebo inhaler, a sham acupuncture, or just no intervention at all. The placebo inhaler, the sham acupuncture, they did make people feel better. There is your placebo effect right there. However, they didn't really improve lung function, not in the same way and not in a stable, steadily improving way. So that distinction is a key here. So that patients' experience improved. And so you might say, job done. But actually, the airway physiology did not really improve. And that is different.
Yeah, so in this case, the placebo changed the feeling of breathlessness, but without actually fixing or addressing the underlying problem.
Yeah. So Sandy, I hope you and everybody understand the difference. And that difference can be dangerous, right? So feeling better and being better, there's a relationship between them, but they're not actually the same. So in some situations, symptom relief is the primary goal. And we've talked about this, right, Sandy? So pain care, things like that. Palliative care, reducing suffering is actually what you're after. So if it doesn't fix the underlying problem in somebody who's in the last stages of life, maybe reducing suffering is the goal. And that's good. That's cool. But in other settings, in many settings, we actually need objective disease measures if you want to get long-term functional relief. So improving lung function in asthma, improving your glucose in diabetes. If you have an infection, placebo is not going to clear the bacteria. You got to get rid of those things that can be a problem. Scans and survival in cancer, that tumor needs to actually physically go away.
Yeah, indeed. And as anyone that's ever owned an old car, I'm sure will testify. So the placebo can improve the signals on the dashboard, but it's not going to fix the engine.
Are you an old car guy?
Oh, yeah. Well, not now. I mean, but I've had a history of old cars. Yeah, you better believe it.
You know, I love those old cars. I love when they take the 1940s, those old sedans, and they sort of modernize the engine, but otherwise you're cruising around. So the dark twin, I should say, of placebos is nocebos. I don't know who coined this term, but it is a term. So placebo is when positive expectations help. Nocebo is when negative expectations harm. So what do I mean by this? If you tell somebody a treatment is going to cause headaches, it might cause nausea, dizziness, fatigue. I think we're all susceptible to this. Many people will experience those very symptoms even if you're giving them a placebo. So this happens in clinical trials, right? So you give patients placebos, but of course you have to read to them the same warnings. People in the placebo arm often report side effects from these things. And that's because they're expecting those side effects. That doesn't mean the side effects from real drugs are fake, but it gets harder to detach those. And this is a problem for pharma. It means that when you're reporting symptoms, including expectation and attention, you have to pay attention to the background noise of the body and what people are expecting.
Yeah, for sure. And even if you haven't been in a situation where you witnessed this, or if you think that the body is noisy, and if you just sit yourself quietly for 30 seconds, you consider the way you feel, think about the various inklings and twinges that you have, and before you know it, you've got like 5 things that all feel slightly odd.
You know, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, I think that's right. I wonder if that's increasing now as our attention spans get shorter. So most of the time, of course, we ignore those signals. We understand what they are. But, you know, if we're in the wrong mind space, if we're frightened, if we have just read a long list of side effects, you know, these things that they give you, and your brain is, of course, scanning those, the brain has expectations. And when the brain starts scanning that and then scanning your body, it starts to find stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've done this myself. I've been in a patient waiting room. I've been the person that's picked up the information leaflet. I've started to read it, and then I've suddenly thought, yeah, I feel a bit dizzy right enough. And, oh, yeah, maybe that's nausea that I'm feeling. And then, before you know it, you've convinced yourself you've
Really?
got whatever it is.
We all do this. So let's put out some other examples that we can talk about. So in COVID vaccine trials, adverse events such as headache and fatigue were reported by many people who received, that's right, the placebo injections. So it doesn't mean that the vaccine side effects were imaginary, right? Because they can have some side effects. But it's hard to parse that out when your placebo group has the same side effects. When a meaningful portion of symptoms also come from expectation in the placebo group, it gets very complicated to try to figure out what is from the actual medication and what is from people's expectations.
And this really matters for communication. Doctors and public health systems have to be honest about risks, but the way they frame that risk can itself change the symptoms and the way that the patient is feeling or reacting.
Yeah, exactly. So saying, this drug commonly causes terrible nausea is pretty different from saying, look, most people do not have severe nausea, but some do. And if you do, we have ways to help if that happens. So you're giving them the same facts, but you're setting expectations very differently.
And of course, there's an economics version of this as well, isn't there? So if you're talking about 90% survival rate and 10% mortality rate, mathematically, these are essentially the same thing, but they're not the same thing emotionally.
Yes, that's right. That adds up. And yeah, exactly. So medicine is just full of these emotionally loaded numbers. But I noticed you use the E word, economics. So please tell me about the economics of placebo.
Yeah, let's try and come to a price.
Yeah.
So this is where any economists in the room might start to get a little bit twitchy. There was a study where people received placebo pain pills, many of the examples that we're talking about, and some were told that the pills were expensive, and others were told that the pills were discounted. But here's the thing: the expensive placebo produced more reported pain relief than the discounted version. This is quite funny. It's quite amusing, right? But it's also pretty alarming. It means that price can act also as a medical signal. Expensive means that we think it's going to be potent and effective. Discounted means it's going to be a weaker result. So even when the pill contains nothing active at all, we've got a perception and a value associated with it.
So does that mean by having crazy high medicine costs in the US, they're actually doing that because they care about the patient and they want them to feel better? And by pushing down costs here in the UK, that we're just letting lots of people suffer. Is that where we're going?
How do you think? I mean, that really is a kind of an extraordinary area to dive into. All those expensive medicines that are on our shelves, they're really trying to help.
I've just mortgaged my future to take this.
Bring me the most expensive medicine you have, because that's
well. I think that there's that happens all the time, right? So in any case, to your point, this is a real problem for branded versus generic medicines. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Where we have two tablets that essentially contain the same active ingredient in the same dose, we expect them to work, at least chemically, exactly the same. But the branded packet might carry more trust with the patient, more familiarity, and more perceived potency. The generic version might feel like it's downgraded, or even when it's not, it might not feel like it's going to be as effective. So for a health system like the NHS, of course, this really matters. We want to use generics where appropriate because they save money and they allow resources to go elsewhere. But if a patient feels that the cheaper, inferior version is not going to work, again, the system ultimately pays the penalty.
That's interesting because because I assume that people here in the UK are more used to taking generics. I wonder if that problem lessens because they don't have the baggage behind it. Definitely in the US, generic is like, oh, that must be crap, right? Because in America, worth is tied up in how much it costs.
So here's a little experiment, Ross. So when you go to the chemist, so when you've got a bit of a flu or a cold, and you're looking at all the various different options, I won't mention the high street pharmacy name. Do you go for the high street pharmacy version, or do you go for the branded version? Because what do you think?
I always go for the cheapest.
That's
but like you, I'm a scientist. I just look straight at the ingredient list when I'm in the pharmacy, and for whatever I'm getting, and whichever is the cheapest, I go down to the per unit. No, but that's I don't think you and I are
chemical. Understanding
exactly, because we understand what the chemistry is about.
Yeah, indeed.
So anyway, but to your point, so of course the molecules are the same, but this is exactly what we've been talking about with placebos. The meaning changes and what you think of it is, I think, your point.
Yes, exactly. And procurement can solve the price issue, but only the communication, of these equivalences that can engender the protection and the trust that we're seeking. So a patient that needs to hear this is not a second class outcome. This is not a second class case. This is the same active medicine. It's just a different price, so that the chosen evidence supports it. And because this helps us to manage a system that helps to spend less money and put the resources where it really matters.
Yeah, actually, that'll be an interesting experiment, because remember, on the first part of this, we talked about even when people were told it was a placebo, the placebo effect still works. So even if you tell them this is not second-class care and that it's generic, I wonder how that will go down. But certainly, that's a better placebo than just giving them a glossy packet. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess what we're trying to engender here, of course, is that trust is cheaper than branding, but a hell of a lot harder to build. If patients believe that they're being fobbed off with something cheap, adherence might fall. They may feel worse. They may return to the GP much earlier, repeating symptoms, etc. There may be expensive alternatives, but they might not create the confidence in the system that we hope or expect. So placebo is not just a clinical curiosity. It really does affect markets, affects pricing, affects prescription, adherence, and ultimately public spending.
So in other words, and I guess this really comes to the doctors who are the face of the NHS, which is it's not just that it buys well, it buys inexpensively. It needs to explain all of this very clearly to the patient. Yeah. Exactly.
I think explanation becomes a really crucial part of that whole value chain.
Yeah. So, okay. So we got the clinician as part of the treatment context. And I think that's a common theme that we're using, which is it's not just the medication, it's how it's presented. This really matters. You can be very upfront about what you're giving them, even tell them if it's a placebo or if it's a generic, all those sorts of things. But if you set expectations for the patient's brain, you can lean in on all the amazing things it can do to help your cause to make that body better. So not just the doctors. You walk in, you're talking about the nurses, the pharmacists, the physiotherapists, radiographers, even the reception staff that you walk in. When we walk into that reception staff, how welcoming they are sort of calms, how your expectations about what you're about to encounter. So every patient knows this. Yeah. A clinician who is just calm and in control, they make you calmer. If they're rushed, this makes you feel like you're a nuisance, and then that sort of dials down what you're expecting to get out of it. If they're worried, you're worried. So a clinician who takes the time, and I have to say they do that especially well here in the UK, in a lot of ways, sometimes better than I had seen in the US. I'm really impressed with this, which is they really explain very clearly, and they help you tolerate all of this uncertainty. So this isn't just like, soft, touchy-feely stuff. This actually affects care, and that is the point. So if a patient understands why they're taking a medicine, they're more likely to take it. They're more likely to respond to it. If they know which side effects actually matter, but that things can be done to correct those, they're less likely to panic. They're less likely to even have those side effects. Basically, if they trust the plan, they'll, relax, they sleep better, they'll feel better, they'll come back when they're supposed to, and they'll stay on with the treatment. As you know, Sandy, I've run clinical trials, and I've talked to many who have run those clinical trials. Adherence to that is really shockingly low in many cases. In other cases, it's much better. And actually, in exploring this, I'm starting to learn how important setting those expectations are to how people trust the system and then show up because they believe it's going to work. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the points you're making here, Ross, and through your experience, are really, really important. This is where the health economics often misses something that's very, very important. We measure appointments, we measure procedures, we look at the waiting times, the prescriptions, and obviously overall costs, but we're not always measuring our understanding, the value of reassurance or trust. Yeah, a confused patient can be an expensive patient. They don't reattend. They don't take their medicine. They seek unnecessary tests, or in the worst cases, of course, they disengage from the care system entirely.
Sure. So, in other words, would you say kindness is economically rational?
Yeah, I would. I'd put I'd probably even more strongly that, you really need to have trust in that infrastructure. If it is strong, the whole system works much better. If it's weak, everything becomes contested. A trusted system can prescribe generics, explain waiting times, encourage vaccinations, support the really difficult treatment choices, and ask patients to tolerate uncertainty. An untrusted system pays a heavy tax on every interaction.
Would you say a trust tax?
Exactly. In medicine, that tax is paid in money, time, anxiety, outcomes, the whole array.
Yeah. I mean, you can really see this. I see this a lot in cancer. Yeah. So think about what you're asking patients to accept. It's pretty frightening, actually. And yeah, we've all seen people having to go through this. So you have chemotherapy. That's crazy. Surgery, radiotherapy, getting hit with radiation. Even scans are pretty intense, going into these big machines and so on. I even, now that I'm thinking about with our conversation, you're often doing a lot of waiting around, right, to set yourself up for these things. All the uncertainty of what's going on, no matter what they tell you, you know that there's always a possibility that something could go poorly. And that's kind of scary. That's why it's called the C word. So a clear, honest conversation, it's not going to remove all the fear, but it can make that fear less isolating. And then that in turn, just as we were just talking about, that can encourage somebody to go ahead, stay with their treatment because they feel like, look, I have a path here. I trust this path. I trust that person. I trust the system. Things have been explained to me in a way that treats me like an adult. And so I'm going to stay with the treatment.
Yeah, and I think this is where the wellness industry becomes quite uncomfortable. Wellness businesses, they often very good at the ritual part. The appointment's so long, the lighting is soft, the language is personalized, the tests look sophisticated, the patient feels seen. That feeling can be real. We should not sneer at it, or we shouldn't disregard it. People want time, they want attention, they want a sense of control. I think if you're a cancer patient waiting, that for me would translate instantly to fear. What is happening all that time that I'm waiting, when I'm waiting for my next appointment? I think that must be incredibly distressful.
Yeah, I know somebody close to me that has gone through that fairly recently, and this is exactly it. I mean, the fear gets ramped up as time stretches forward, for sure. And of course, it can be very isolating because people want to help, but at the same time, they're not sure what to say. Yeah, all this is I guess it's almost like another podcast in its own. But getting back to your point about the wellness world, yeah, that's why they're popular. They sell everything that we've just been talking about, all the things that go into making placebo successful. They have all that. The problem, of course, as we've also discussed, is that the product that they're selling doesn't have much evidence to it. It's often quite weak, very rarely do these things play out. I'm old enough now to have watched dozens and dozens of these things come through the system, and they all end up, like, with almost without exception, end up being nonsense. So the patient does feel better, and the supplement or whatever they're taking, the detox, that gets all the credit. But of course, it doesn't last. What do you think?
Yeah, they may feel very better in a very short time scale, but of course, they not overall. The wellness industry, they win the theater, and of course, they lose the biology.
Yeah, sure. And actually, this whole episode has caused me to really understand better things like Goop. Remember Goop?
Yeah.
Calling you out, Goop. By making the product very expensive, just that alone, it's super expensive. It's a pretty cool website. And it can make the patient better. So you can say, so what's the problem? The problem, of course, is it delays real treatment. And this happens a lot, unfortunately. So it can actually cause real harm. And to some extent, that's on us. So scientists were not trained to understand marketing. Maybe you are, but I'm not. I'm terrible at marketing. So as a cancer scientist, I just want to be very clear. Hope is not a treatment plan. I'm not very good at saying that in a way that will invoke efficiently this placebo effect. But meaning is not a substitute for therapy. Ritual is not replacement for scientific evidence. In the end, over time, that will out.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And just what you were saying there about marketing reminded me of one of the courses I did when I was studying in part for an MBA. And the lecturer immediately opened the description of the marketing program as marketing is a science. And of course, my hand shot up. No, it's not. Marketing is not a science. And we were immediately off at a bad start. But I think the point you're making here is really, really important, Ross. And I think the thing is that mainstream medicine, we shouldn't sit back and be smug. If people are leaving evidence-based care to find time, attention, and meaning elsewhere, that's really a failure of the system.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you think the answer is? It's not to make medicine colder and more precise. It's to combine evidence with real humanity and I should say humility.
Yeah, and I think this is. I mean, I hadn't given this enough thought before this podcast, before we started doing this 2-part, and you're really getting back to the molecule and the meaning. But here's a little bit of an extra thought, Ross. I mean, should we be removing all of the kind of branding around medicine? Is the branding really an important part? Surely it's just, this is the drug, this is the effect, these are the potential side effects, but this is the potential outcome. All of that branding that's associated with that drug, etc. Is that not just distraction? But maybe that's a wider question.
Yeah, I don't know. So maybe another way or a different way of asking that question, maybe I'm going to throw this back to you, is in the US, they allow advertisement for a lot of these, right? In fact, almost all of those. And so you see a lot of these medications advertised. Is that, and of course we all sneer at that, but does that advertising help set those expectations in a way that can also be positive?
Yeah, and this is why I've always got to be careful about asking you a question, because I always get a more difficult question back again.
Usually with an American take on it. Advertising, it's a fundamental good.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's a really good point.
But this is what we're talking about, right?
I suppose yeah, exactly. And the branding gives you confidence that the drug is going to work.
Yeah.
It's very complicated.
Yep, I agree. Well, my friend, I think we've probably exhausted most of the aspects of the placebo that we want to talk about. Are you ready for a little bit of wee bit of joy?
It's that time, Ross. It's that time to think about the other things that have been happening in our week. And I don't know, do you want to kick us up this week? What's been lighting you up this week, Ross?
Sure. And I have no idea what your wee bit of joy is. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I should say, that and thank you listeners for the feedback. We really appreciate it, that we're trying to be a little more efficient and a wee bit of joy, because I in particular can go on for forever. And it was starting to become endless joy.
That's not a bad thing, but yeah, we're going to try.
I know, but we want to respect
people's
people's time. We really do. So my wee bit of joy this week, I want to talk about one of my bucket list items.
Yeah, immediately it sends danger around that.
Well, you must have some bucket list things that you've just never been able to cross off. I've lived a magical life and I've crossed many of my bucket list things, but there's two key ones. One, which I'm not going to talk about, is milking a cow. I've never milked a cow. I'm from New Jersey. The only cows I ever saw was at a prison farm nearby, and it was men in orange jumpsuits and cows and a lot of barbed wire. So no cows. And since then, people send me pictures of them at fairs milking cows just to taunt me. The second one is puffins. I've always wanted to see a live puffin.
That's incredible. A live puffin. You're going to tell us more about this, this need.
That's right. So, and I want to say, let me be clear how I feel about puffins, okay? I feel like penguins have had their time. I'm tired of penguins. They have a great PR system. All they do is waddle around. They don't look nearly as cool as puffins. I could go on for a while about how much better puffins are than penguins, but they don't have a good PR system there. To me, penguins, they have an incredible PR system. They're all kind of rich, lying in the back, hanging out there in the Antarctics, smoking cigs and drinking margaritas and saying, those puffins are idiots. So I have very strong feelings about that. So the reason I bring this up is I discovered this past week that there are live puffins online. You can have a puffin online feed. Did you know this?
I didn't know, but I do know that, a lot of bird colonies that are, monitored these days have got live cameras. So you can see things like the ospreys up in Bothgarten and, yeah.
Dude, it's great. It's like nature's ASMR. Okay.
Wow.
So I'll throw this on a big screen behind me at work when I'm working. So right now I'm at home. So there's no plot. You never know what they're going to do. And crazily today when I looked, they weren't even in sight of there. You could hear them, but you couldn't see them. They're not arguing ever, unlike penguins. Penguins can be kind of nasty. There's no breaking news. It's just this cliff, a bunch of, you can see the sea, a bunch of wind, all that stuff. And then you have these magical puffins, and they're just kind of stomping around like as if they've been invited to a formal dinner. They can't really find the address, so they're kind of stomping around the cliff trying to figure out where I put the address. See, this is why they're great, because they do stuff. And so I like to put it on as a background screen, truly background, kind of something to look at between emails. Reminds me how much I love puffins. Kind of slows everything down a little bit. And I have to say, this week, we've been talking about dementia, aging. We've been talking about placebos and cancer and all that stuff. So I just wanted to say, to recover from all of this heavy talk, I want to throw out there watching just a little puffin seabird standing on a cliff. So Sandy, this is my wee bit of joy, Puffin Live feed. What do you think, my friend?
I think we've got to get you out there and got to introduce you to puffins in the wild.
Would be too much joy.
Yeah,
I don't know if I could handle it.
My father, bless him, he used to have a boat that he kept in Stonehaven, up on the northeast coast of Scotland, just slightly south of Aberdeen. And he was a big fan of fishing, and he used to potter around in his boat. He used to take me out occasionally. And we always got a great view of puffins, because the puffins would be in the sort of cliff tops and the hills nearby on the seashore, and they were always out fishing, or certainly the times of year that we used to take the boat out. So yeah, they're remarkable little birds, and they're really cute. And I understand your affection for them. They're really cool.
So were they great or the greatest?
In terms of the bird population, yeah, they're pretty cool. Pretty cool.
I might be setting high expectations. When I go there, we're like, hey, they're just birds. Give me some wee bit of joy that's not puffin. or if you want to do
Yeah,
biochemical.
so I guess I've been attending the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, Ross. I was through in Glasgow the other day, and it was very kind. My daughter gifted some tickets to Helen and I, and yeah, we headed through and we saw some athletics yesterday. It was really fun day. And it kind of reminded me of times when I've gone to the Commonwealth Games before. So I'm lucky. I'm not sure. Are you aware of the Commonwealth Games, Ross? Do you know
A bit,
about them?
yeah.
So,
And I know that Glasgow stepped in to take them over, yeah.
yeah, so it's a bit like a sort of a mini Olympics. So it's only the Commonwealth nations. And of course, there are a lot of those, but not in the same extent, of course, when you have the Olympics and you have kind of world representation. But it's great. It brings all those countries together, and the Australians they're mad daft on sport, and they always seem to do really really well. But you get all these different countries participating, and it's fantastic to see. It brings a lot of people together. A lot of people travel, and as you say, Glasgow stepped in at the last minute because I think the games were meant to be in Australia, and then for some financial or other reasons, they had to withdraw. And Glasgow stepped in at the last minute. Having hosted the games last in 2014, they decided that they would do this again. It's smaller scale than the full games that were held in 2014, but it was great fun to be part of. So I went through the Scotstoun Stadium yesterday, and we saw, as I say, the athletics, and I'd never seen javelin throwing before. And the main, I guess one of the main events yesterday morning was the qualification for the javelin tournament. And it was very high winds. And I've never seen a bunch of reporters look so pale and ashen faced as these javelins were flying all over the place. There was one poor competitor who obviously had a really incredible throw, but just couldn't get to terms with the windy conditions. And every throw was outside of the arc, which is the measure. So unfortunately, at the end, they got disqualified. But it was an incredible field. I think they had all of the major throwers from Olympic champion, world champion, so incredible array of talent. And the announcer had said that this is a field that would represent the best of the competitors if this were the Olympics. Mm-hmm. So fantastic to see and fantastic to witness. One of the great things about the Commonwealth Games, and I don't know when they started doing this, but the Paralympics takes place at the same time. So that it's not a separate event, it's the same event. So that I find that really, really cool. I think that's really impressive. And then I guess the one slight annoying thing that's been really sort of bugging me in the past few weeks is here in the UK on BBC television, there's a recurring advert, which is it's well placed. It's meant to reassure us of the license payers' money going to the BBC and to remind us of all the great things that we get from the BBC. But the recurring question is, what does the BBC actually do for me? And one of the things that I really, really think that they've missed an opportunity here is to show the Commonwealth Games live on TV. It was always a big feature. Sport was always a big feature of the BBC, and I just find it very sad that it's not on the BBC at the moment. You're in Glasgow, Ross. You get a chance in the next few days, go see any of the events. I really encourage you to do it. It's great fun.
Okay. Yeah, I have visitors, and maybe I'll bring them along.
Go see the bowling or the lawn bowling. That's the strange thing about the Commonwealth Games, right? You get some sports that are just a little bit.
Next time you come over to Glasgow, I'll take you out lawn bowling. We can make it into the Commonwealth Games as lawn bowlers.
Yeah, exactly. Right, we better wrap up. We promised we'd keep it to time today, Ross, and I think we've covered a lot of ground on the placebo effect. It's been a fascinating discussion. So maybe we should put a pin in that, and
sure.
we can move on.
Well, and speaking of moving on, for our next episode, what's not a placebo? Murder.
Yeah, we're back on the subject of murder again. It's going to be fascinating.
I think so. Well, it's lovely to see you, Sandy, as always. What do you think?
been great to catch up. It's been great to talk more. And yeah, I'm going to look for an opportunity for you to come together with a puffin colony soon. And
well, we'll see you next week in Ghislaine to play golf, right?
You bring your binoculars. You might even see some and the Bass Rock.
Don't taunt me. Don't taunt me. My luck, I'll hit a golf ball and I'll hit one of them. All right, big guy.
All right. Great. Thanks very much. That's all from us in this episode. Thanks very much
everybody.
For listening.
Keep the heed and see y'all next time. Bye.
Goodbye.
Yeah, see the vision clear. We're here to run the long game. Blueprint set, no fear. Playing out the long game. The long game. Hey, the long game.